Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting of the Assembly Committee on Natural Resources to order. Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Assemblywoman Anderson.
Present.
Assemblywoman Black.
Here.
Assemblywoman Brown May.
Here.
Assemblywoman Carlton.
Here.
Assemblywoman Cohen.
Here.
Assemblyman Ellison.
Present.
Assemblywoman Gonzalez.
Here.
Assemblywoman Hanson.
Here.
Assemblywoman Martinez.
Present.
Assemblywoman Titus.
Here.
Assemblyman Wheeler.
Here.
Chair Watts.
Here. Thank you. We have all members present. We have a quorum. Before we get started with our agenda for today, I'd like to just go through a few quick housekeeping announcements as usual. Members, please remember to mute yourselves when you are not speaking so that we can minimize background noise. Also, please remember when making motions to provide your name as well so that I can make sure I recognize the right people and we can get it clear for the record. Members of the public wishing to participate in our meetings can do so in a variety of ways. Information on how to participate can be found on every meeting agenda for this committee, as well as on the help page at the legislative website. You can find a link to the help page on a header at the top of every page on the legislative website. To participate, you must sign up. You can submit opinion polls as well, or sign up to testify. Written comments can also be emailed to our committee email address, which you can find on our agendas and website before, during, or up to 48 hours after the meeting. All committee exhibits and amendments must be submitted electronically as a PDF to our committee manager no later than 4 p.m. on the business day prior to our meeting. Any amendments must include the bill number, a statement of intent, and contact information. All exhibits that are submitted can be found on the Nevada Legislature's website, where you can also sign up for personalized legislative tracking. And we ask that public comments and testimony be kept to 2 minutes so that all speakers can be accommodated and for us to get through our agendas in a timely manner. With that, we will move into our agenda for today, and we're going to start with the work session. So as previously mentioned, we do not typically take testimony during a work session. However, we call upon bill sponsors to clarify any questions that may have come up. So with that, we'll open up our work session. We will start with Assembly Bill 34. Mr. Sinisbeck, our policy analyst, will walk us through the work session document. Mr. Sinisbeck, please go ahead whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. For the record, Jan Sinisbeck with the Research Division of LCB. As LCB staff, I cannot advocate for or against any measure comes before this committee. Assembly Bill 34 was heard in this committee on February 22nd, and the bill defines the term control as it applies to noxious weeds, and it authorized the Director of the State Department of Agriculture to adopt regulations to certify certain agricultural products as being free from propagated parts from which noxious weeds may grow. The bill authorized the department to provide a notice of its finding that an area is infested with certain pests, noxious weeds, or plant diseases to the owner or occupant of an area by electronic mail. The bill also exempts a business that is licensed by another state that sells nursery stock only to the public exclusively via the internet from obtaining a license from the director of the department. Lastly, the bill provides the prohibition against engaging in certain activities involving pest control without a license and provides provisions governing the certification of restricted use pesticide application. There's one amendment proposed to the bill. The amendment was proposed by the State Department of Agriculture and makes the following changes. It clarifies the term certificate authorizes an applicator to purchase, use, or supervise the use of a restrictive pesticide, clarifies that a non-private applicator and a commercial applicator can be a person licensed to apply or supervise the application of any general use pesticide, and it clarifies that a restricted use pesticide is a highly toxic pesticide that has been classified for restricted use pursuant to federal law. And lastly, clarifies that certain provisions apply to an authorized commercial applicator or a certified nonprofit applicator, which are persons who are authorized or certified to use or supervise the use of restricted use pesticides. And that amendment and explanation should be also attached to your work session document, which is on Alice for your further review. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Stanisbeck. In addition, I know during the hearing, there were some questions about the fee provision within the bill. And there were some follow-up conversations between our legal staff and the department. So I would just like to briefly invite Ms. Jepson to provide any additional remarks or clarification on that component as well, since I believe it was a matter of discussion during the hearing.
For the record, Ashley Jepson, and thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to provide some clarification. So as the email that came out from the legal division clarified, and it was very helpful for our department as well, the language as it stood in 587 was specific to the inspection of forage for the presence of noxious weeds and that authority for charging the fee. So there was a provision that we've been acting under to do our weed-free certification program. That's what that actual program is. Our weed-free certification program is under NAC 555, and that's why we've been trying to fold in that same fee structure within that actual area where the program's housed. But the terminology that's existing in NRS between the two, weed-free forage versus weed-free certification, certainly created some challenges. So we would like to move forward with making sure that the fee is in 555, and in the future, our intention is to remove that language in 587. So ultimately, we only charge the one fee. It's the $50 fee that's in our 587, and we'd be operating under that under 555. So our intention is not to duplicate, not to add additional fees, but to just have that one fee associated with the program. But I realize it's not as streamlined as it should be and not as clear, and that this will allow us to be able to do it if the change is proceeded with. So thank you. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Ms. Jepson. Are there any questions from members?
Yes, Chair Watts, if I may.
Go ahead, Assemblywoman Anderson.
Thank you. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly, Ms. Jepson. Currently, this fee is being assessed. It just happens to be in a different area of the code, or am I misunderstanding that?
For the record, Ashley Jepson, that's part of the challenge. And so we currently do have a weed-free certification program. We're running its voluntary program. And we've been using the fee authority in 587 for the inspection of forage for noxious weeds. We've been operating under that authority to charge that fee to run the program. That's what that was initially built in and intended for. So yes, but now the actual program is housed in 555. And that's where the big challenge is, which is why we're trying to make sure the fee is in the same area as the actual program. So there's language problems in 587. There's program housing challenges. So that's kind of big picture. So yes, we've been operating under the language under 587. We're trying to get it in 555. We're not trying to duplicate, but there's definitely some challenges there. Hence, Mr. Allen's email. I hope that answered, and I'm happy to expand.
It completely explained it, and thank you so much for that explanation.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Anderson. I believe we have a question from Assemblyman Wheeler as well.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chair. It might be more for legal, actually. From what I understand, Ms. Jepson saying is that the fee already exists, so this is not a new fee, it's just in a different section. If that's correct, then would this remove the 2/3 requirement on the bill?
Thank you for that question, Assemblyman Wheeler, and I'll see if we can get a response from legal. In the meantime, since this is establishing it within this new chapter, the 2/3 requirement exists. However, the agency's intention is to have it in the chapter that matches with, for statute and regulation that syncs up, and not to use the fee that's in another portion of regulation. So while the intent is that there will not be any new fee, because we're establishing it within this section of statute, it will still have a 2/3 requirement.
Okay, that's kind of what I thought, Mr. Chairman. I'm looking at the amendment here and I didn't see the language to do that. So I'm going to have to go no on this until that's done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wheeler. Just to clarify, so is the issue that the fee is not explicitly being removed from the other portion of, I believe it's regulation, not statute, in the bill? Is that the issue here?
I believe that is the issue. So what we're doing, when I don't see, Mr. Chairman, the language moving that fee over, and it's, to me, it's a brand new fee until that language exists, which is why it's 2/3.
Thank you, Assemblyman Wheeler. Ms. Jepson, is there anything else that you'd like to add in this regard in terms of the transition of the fee from areas of statute or regulation, how you see that proceeding?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Ashley Jepson. Yes, we will be undergoing a number of regulation changes after the conclusion of session. And we will be removing that from 587 and putting it under 555, assuming this proceeds. So that will be resolved. That's our intention.
Thank you. Any additional questions? I believe, actually, no, it doesn't look like we have any additional questions at this time. So with that, I'd accept a motion to amend and do pass Assembly Bill 34.
So moved from Cohen. To amend and do pass.
Thank you. We have a motion from Vice Chair Cohen. Do we have a second?
Second from Anderson.
Thank you. We have a second on the motion from Assemblywoman Anderson. Is there any discussion on the motion? I believe we had Assemblywoman Anderson.
So I appreciated Assemblymember Wheeler bringing up the code during their, especially as a freshman, although I've obviously watched a few bills and everything, because I didn't think we had the ability to change code in the NRS. So I understand where it's coming, where the concerns are coming from. But I just wanted to verify we don't have that ability to double check code. But if this were to get through, then the code would need to match up with the law. Is that correct with the process?
Thank you for that question, Assemblywoman Anderson. I actually, if it's all right, I would like to defer to Assemblywoman Carlton, who has quite a bit of experience on these issues. If you could share some information with the committee, I'd appreciate it.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. Happy to help whenever I can. We don't process regulations during the session. There's so much other work going on. So I understand being a gal from the Show Me State, where Mr. Wheeler is coming from, he wants to see that that's actually going to be removed. But unfortunately, there isn't an opportunity to do that right now. And it wouldn't have been appropriate to do it before the bill because they need to still be able to keep doing their job while we're in session and until the regulations get all the way through. It could take 6 months to 9 months, even a year after session to get another regulation through because of the backlog. So this is one of those where you've got to trust the regulator / administrator to follow through on the commitments that they have made on the record.
Thank you for stepping in and providing that context, Assemblywoman Carlton. Additionally, I did get a message from legal confirming that they do not amend the Nevada Administrative Code during session. They would likely need the new fee authority to implement the new fee, and then they can eliminate the old fee. Are there any other questions on the motion or discussion? All right, hearing none, I'd ask the secretary to conduct a roll call vote.
Assemblywoman Anderson,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Black,
No.
Assemblywoman Brown May,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Carlton,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Cohen,
Yes.
Assemblyman Ellison,
I'm a no, but I'd like to reserve my right. And
Assemblywoman,
I really like, no, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I was looking for my note. Mr. Chairman, I do like my colleague from District 1 in her answer, but I'm still going to do some research, but I just like to reserve my rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ellison. Just a reminder, please provide that during discussion on the motion moving forward, not when we're at the point of the vote. Please continue, Madam Secretary. Thank you.
Assemblywoman Gonzalez,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Hanson,
No.
Assemblywoman Martinez,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Titus,
No.
Assemblyman Wheeler,
No.
Chair Watts.
Yes. The motion carries. With that, we'll move on to the next item on our work session, which is Assembly Bill 72. Mr. Stinisbeck, will you please walk us through the work session document for this bill? Oh, I forgot something, which is to assign the floor statement for this. I'll assign the floor statement on this measure to Assemblywoman Gonzalez. And with that, I believe we can proceed to the next item on our work session document.
Thank you, Chair Watts. For the record, Jan Schinnespec. Assembly Bill 72 was heard in this committee on February 24th. The bill adds a representative of the Nevada Indian Commission as a voting member of the Nevada State Board of Geographic Names. The bill also removes the state resident cartographer as the board's executive secretary and requires the voting members of the board to select the person to serve in this position. Lastly, the bill clarifies that the chair and vice chair are designated from among the voting members of the board, and the vice chair presides in the absence of the chair. Thank you, Chair Watts.
Thank you, Mr. Stinisbeck. Are there any questions for members on Assembly Bill 72? Okay, hearing and seeing none, I would accept a motion to do pass.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I believe that was a motion from Assemblywoman Carlton, a second from Assemblyman Wheeler. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, will the secretary please conduct a roll call vote?
Assemblywoman Anderson,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Black,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Brown May,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Carlton,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Cohen,
Yes.
Assemblyman Ellison,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Gonzalez,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Hanson,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Martinez,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Titus,
Yes.
Assemblyman Wheeler,
Yes.
Chair Watts.
Yes. Thank you. With that, the motion carries. I'll assign the floor statement to Assemblywoman Martinez.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. With that, that concludes our work session. We'll now move on to our bill hearings for today. We will start with Assembly Bill 102, which revises requirements for the issuance of certain annual permits for entering, camping, and boating in state parks and recreational areas. With that, I believe we have Assemblywoman Krasner present. Welcome to the Committee on Natural Resources, Assemblywoman. You may begin your presentation whenever you're ready. I'll open the hearing on Assembly Bill 102.
Thank you, Chair Watts and members of the committee. For the record, I am Nevada State Assemblywoman Lisa Krasner, representing Nevada State Assembly District 26. I am here to present Assembly Bill 102 for your consideration. We are working off of the amendment that you will find listed in Nellis, please. I'd first like to give you just a little background. As the committee knows, Nevada offers truly beautiful and unique state parks and recreational areas. There are so many amazing outdoor opportunities in state parks like Sand Harbor and Valley of Fire in Nevada's Mojave Desert. With the COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen an increase in visitation numbers to state parks and recreational areas. Understandably, more people have felt the need during these hard times to get outside and safely recreate in our great state parks. In Nevada, we have a long history of serving our country, and in turn, Nevadans pride themselves on honoring their fellow men and women who have served this great country, our veterans. In the legislature, we often consider proposed legislation that attempts to honor veterans and expresses our appreciation for them for their dedicated service. Under certain legislation, we extend our gratitude to veterans who have a service-connected disability. Assembly Bill 102 is such a bill, as it attempts to allow more disabled veterans to experience our state parks and recreational areas so that they can find relief and enjoy the great outdoors. If I could please ask that you draw your attention to the amendment on Nellis, because just as of last night, we changed the bill. I contacted the State Department of Conservation and Natural Resources Division of Parks State Director Bob Mergel, because there was a fiscal note on the bill. And the fiscal note was $48,000 for 2 years. And I asked him, what can we do? We're in a budget crisis here at the Nevada Legislature. How can we get this to a zero fiscal note? And so between the two of us, we looked at the bill and we just decided that the current law is that a veteran with a service-related disability of 10% or more who has been honorably discharged gets to go to our Nevada state parks basically for free. They waive the $250 a year permit and just ask them to pay a $30 administration fee, and they can enjoy hiking, boating, camping for a year. But that 0 to 10% service-related disability was excluded. So we decided to include that. So we put back in the amendment, the 0 to 10% service-connected disability veteran who was honorably discharged can now also go for free to all Nevada state parks. And when I say free, again, that's waiving the $250 annual fee and merely paying the $30 recreational fee for all activities for 1 year. And with that change to the bill, the fiscal note is zero. Thank you, Chair. That concludes my testimony. And veteran Tony Yarborough would like to co-present with me. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Krasner. Mr. Yarborough, you may proceed whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and Vice Chair and Committee. My name is Tony Yarborough, for the record. That's Yarbrough. I am an officer with the United Veterans Legislative Council, and I'm also an officer with the VFW State Department of Nevada. And basically, I represent approximately 500,000 people in the state overall for veterans, military, families, and advocates. And I can tell you this is something we've been working on for now the third session, trying to find a way that we can continue to honor and congratulate and thank our veterans for their service. And this is one of our simple processes that we can go to. And one of the things that's critical to us is that we realize, and nobody's got the answer, by the way, that suicide prevention is one of the biggest things that we try to tackle as far as finding the best way that we can help stop the 20 suicides per day in veterans. And we have learned through a lot of analysis and testing that's been founded through the VA, funded by Congress, that we find that when people are involved in outdoor activities with their peers, that it reduces and almost eliminates that process of suicide prevention. When I say eliminates, it improves it in the fact that it's a mental diversion that makes you not think about the tragedy and the loss of life that you had to experience and witness in your service to others. And I can tell you that I think this is one of the best bills that we've got going right now in the legislature, and I would do everything and anything and deeply appreciate your support in passing AB 102. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Yarborough. With that, I believe that concludes the presentation, so we'll open it up to questions. First, I believe we have a question from Assemblywoman Carlton.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Assemblywoman Krasner. In reading the bill, before I got the amendment, I was trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together. So your statement that the amendment actually zeroes out the fiscal note, I'm still confused by, because these folks currently are paying the $250. So we're going to eliminate that, and they're only going to pay the $30. So I believe there still would be a difference, and we might need to get the state parks person to maybe give us an idea of about how many folks that is, so that we can just get a real representation of it. I'm not sure this really is zero when you look at the whole picture. So is there something I'm missing, Assemblywoman Krasner?
Thank you. I actually worked out the numbers with Bob Mergel and then again with Kat Miller, because Kat Miller she's the head of Veterans Affairs for the state of Nevada. We had a conference call yesterday right after my call with Bob Mergel. She said that the numbers for the 0 to 10% disability are 9,695. But then you have to take out the percent that were not honorably discharged, because that's the other requirement. You have to be honorably discharged.
And thank you, Assemblywoman. I hate to cut you off, but that's not really not my question. My question is, these folks currently are getting this pass and they're paying $250. And I hate to take me down the Ways and Means rabbit hole, Mr. Chairman. And now they're going to be paying $30. So there's a number of people that will be paying less. So that I understand what you're trying to do, and I totally support it. I think it's great. I wish we could get rid of the $30.
I did too.
But I still think there is a fiscal impact someplace, because we had folks paying $250 and now they're only going to be paying $30. So there's a $220 difference. So, Mr. Chairman, I won't take.
I have the number. Chair Watts to Assemblywoman Carlton. The number is 7.5 persons.
As I said, there's a lot more numbers we need to get. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Carlton. I appreciate you bringing that up. It is an interesting issue because, of course, as a policy committee, our job is really to focus on evaluating the policy issues, and then the fiscal issues get addressed in our money committee, which is the Ways and Means Committee here in the Assembly. So that said, I don't believe we have state parks on. So we may need to ask them for some follow-up information from the conversations with the bill sponsor and get that distributed to the committee for their information on this issue. All right, let's see. Do we have any other questions from committee members? All right, seeing none, we will move on to testimony on this bill. Again, as a reminder, in order to provide testimony, you must sign up on the legislative website where you'll be given the information to call in. We ask that anybody providing testimony limit their comments to 2 minutes so that we can get through our agenda in a timely manner. With that, we'll start with testimony in support of Assembly Bill 102. I'd ask Broadcast and Production Services to open it up and see if we have anybody in the queue wishing to testify in support.
Thank you, Chair. To testify in support on Assembly Bill 102, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits 747, please state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes and may begin now.
Chair, for the record, and committee members, my name is Andrew Lee Pilbit, last name L-E-P as in Paul, E-I-L, B as in boy, E-T. And I represent the combat wounded veterans in the state of Nevada and the Purple Heart, and the 70,000 disabled American veterans in the state of Nevada. And I am the current chair of the United Veterans Legislative Council, where we represent 250,000 veterans and 500,000 when you count their families in the state of Nevada. So after Tony Yarborough's testimony, we ditto everything he said, but I'd like to add to that the outdoor activities has been identified in suicide prevention as a big issue to help our veterans. There's many groups that have gotten together in the last couple of years with four-wheeling, fishing, hiking, horseback riding, and a lot of these things have helped our veterans. This here is a bill that's representing all of those disabled, many of whom shed their blood on the battlefields of the world for our country. So for the UVLC, Disabled American Vets and the Military Order of the Purple Heart, we wholly support this bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your testimony and to all of our veterans for their service to this country. We'll go on to the next caller in support.
Caller with the last 3 digits 088, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin now. Caller with the last 3 digits 088, please press *6 to unmute and you may begin.
My name is Steve Sanson, S-A-N as in Nancy, S-O-N as in Nancy. I'm the president of Veterans in Politics International, Inc. and Veterans in Politics Foundation, also a Marine Gulf War disabled service-connected veteran. We support veterans from all branches of the service and from all wars from World War II to the War on Terror. In addition, we have an extremely large civilian membership. We have been active since 1992, and we have continued our activism because we love our country and community. Our mission is to educate, organize, and awaken our veterans and their families to select, support, and intelligently vote for those candidates who would help create a better world to protect ourselves from our own governments and a culture of corruption, and to be the political voice for those in other groups who do not have one. Many of us say we support veterans, but fail to act on that phrase. Today, all of you will have an opportunity to show your support by voting for Assembly Bill 102. Less than 1% of our population serves in our military in defense of this country. The very least we can do is support them in every way possible. Remember, when you vote, it's a generation of veterans that gave you the right and opportunity to become an elected official. Without our veterans, none of us would live the life we have today. I speak for the entire membership of Veterans in Politics International in support of AB 102. May God bless our veterans, this legislative council, the great state of Nevada, and the United States of America. Semper Fidelis, and thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. We'll go on to the next caller in support.
Chair, there are no more callers in support at this time.
Thank you. With that, we'll move on to testimony in opposition to Assembly Bill 102. Let's see if we have anyone in the queue for opposition.
To testify in opposition on Assembly Bill 102, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, it appears there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you. And with that, we'll move on to testimony in the neutral position. I believe we actually may have somebody in the neutral position who can provide some additional info. So with that, BPS, can we see if we have anyone wishing to testify in neutral on Assembly Bill 102?
To testify in neutral on Assembly Bill 102, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits 905, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin now.
Good afternoon. For the record, I am Fred Wager, F-R-E-D-W-A-G-A-R, Deputy Director of Operations for Nevada Department of Veteran Services, and I'm here to testify in the neutral on AB 102. Chair Watts, Vice Chair Cohen, and members of the Assembly Natural Resources Committee, thank you for this opportunity to address you. AB 102, as amended, would remove the requirement for a veteran who is a resident of the state of Nevada to have 10% service-connected disability or more to obtain a disabled veteran permit for unlimited entrance to all state parks and recreation areas for 12 months after the permit is issued. The permit would be issued without charge, except that the division could charge and collect an administrative fee for the issuance of the permit in an amount sufficient to cover the cost of issuing the permit. According to the Department of Veterans Affairs Regional Office in Reno, currently 61,113 veterans receive service-connected compensation in Nevada. That's 10% rating or higher. As Assemblywoman Krasner noted, she had a discussion with our office yesterday. She advised us that she had spoken with Nevada State Parks Administrator Bob Mergel, who indicated approximately 0.1% of eligible veterans are currently taking advantage of the benefit. If passed, this bill, as amended, would allow those with 0% evaluations to be eligible for this benefit. An estimated 9,695 veterans, Nevada veterans, have a 0% disability evaluation. However, there is also the requirement to have an honorable discharge from military service. Using national estimates, 78.29% of veterans have an honorable discharge. This equates to an estimated 7,590 0% service-connected disabled veterans with honorable discharges who would qualify for this benefit. However, if the same percentage of approximately 0.1% apply for the permit, this would equate to about 8 veterans who might take advantage of this benefit. Finally, I would like to note that a University of Michigan study states veterans participating in extended outdoor group recreation show signs of improved mental health, suggesting a link between the activities and long-term psychological well-being. Chairman Watts, Vice Chair Cohen, and committee members, thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony and for providing some of the additional context on potential utilization based on the proposal within this bill. Members, does anyone have any questions for the speaker? All right, hearing none, thank you for your testimony. We'll go back to BPS to see if we have anyone else wishing to testify in the neutral position.
Caller with the last 3 digits 833, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Watts and members of the committee. My name is Bob Mergell, and I serve as the administrator of the Nevada Division of State Parks. Sorry I couldn't jump on there earlier to answer some questions. The division is neutral on Assembly Bill 102. AB 102 as written would have a fiscal impact on the Nevada Division of State Parks. Currently, the division gives Nevada veterans who have incurred a permanent service-connected disability an annual all-access permit for entering camping and boating in all Nevada's state parks and recreational areas. An all-access permit costs the general public $250, but is provided to veterans for free. The only charge is a $30 administrative fee, which offsets the actual cost of the permits. By the time staff costs are factored in, the $30 administrative fee doesn't even cover actual costs, but the administrative fee does help to offset those costs. The division supports veterans. In fact, the division recently made regulation changes to implement a day use discount of $1 for all veterans. The division does not, however, have the ability to absorb this additional fiscal impact, particularly during these unprecedented times. The proposed amendment would remove the division's fiscal note as it restores the ability to collect the administrative fee. Thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions the committee might have.
Thank you, Mr. Mergell, for your testimony. Are there any questions from members of the committee for Mr. Mergell?
Mr. Chairman, may I?
Please do. Go ahead, Assemblywoman Carlton.
And thank you. And like I said, I didn't want to get too far in the weeds with the money, but Mr. Mergell brought up a point that I know has always been true, that $30 doesn't actually cover the whole cost. Mr. Mergell, can you give us an idea of what that cost really is?
Again, Bob Mergell for the record. Thank you for the question. I don't have those figures with me, but the $30 definitely costs the print or covers the printing costs and covers the actual costs of mailing the permits out to all of the various parks for distribution. And then we also have to buy receipt books in order to track those. It doesn't cover the costs of employees that touch that permit at every location. So I'd have to sit down and do some fairly dig in pretty deep on how long it takes to actually fill out the permit, interact with the public, and then go through the rest of the process of tracking the permit. Because those costs are difficult to calculate. That's why we settled on the $30 several years ago, because it covers the actual hard cost of the permit.
And thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And we'll get deeper into this when we have the other discussions. I just wanted everyone to be aware when we talk about these things, there are a lot of other costs off to the side. So we just want to make sure we give the parks the money that they need to do their job. So thank you very much.
Thank you for the question. I believe we have a question from Assemblyman Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. McGill, you raised an interesting point. The labor that's involved, et cetera. Those people, you're not going to have to add extra people, right? So those people that are doing this would receive the same paycheck and the end cost would be the same without adding extra people and extra salary, correct?
Bob Mergell for the record, and that is true. We have staff in place already to issue these permits, so there would be no additional costs as those people would already be in the office issuing permits or going about their business, doing their regular duties. It would just add to the number of permits that they issue, but they're at work anyway.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Mergell? Seeing none, thank you again for calling in and providing some additional information to the committee, Mr. Mergell. We'll move on to see if anyone else wishes to testify in the neutral position on Assembly Bill 102.
We are on neutral testimony for Assembly Bill 102. If you have recently joined the call and would like to testify in the neutral position, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, it seems there are no more callers in neutrals at this time.
Thank you very much. With that, I'll close testimony and turn it over to Assemblywoman Krasner if she has any brief closing remarks she'd like to make.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair Watts. I just want to say it's an honor for me to bring this bill on behalf of our veterans. Thank you to Tony Yarborough for testifying with me. Thank you to Mr. Bob Mergell for confirming that the fiscal note has been removed with the amendment. And thank you, Chair Watts, for giving me this opportunity to present my bill to you and the committee members. I would appreciate your support of AB 102.
Thank you for your presentation, Assemblywoman. With that, I will close the hearing on Assembly Bill 102, and we will open the committee hearing on Assembly Joint Resolution number 3, which urges various actions relating to the protecting and conservation of land and water. With that, we will welcome one of our own members, Assemblywoman Gonzalez, and her co-presenters to present this bill. You may proceed whenever you are ready.
Thank you, Chair Watts and members of the committee. For the record, I'm Assemblywoman Cecilia Gonzalez, representing Assembly District 16 in beautiful Clark County, Nevada. And it is my pleasure to present to you today Assembly Joint Resolution 3. AJR 3 attempts to address climate change by urging the United States Congress to help designate 30% of Nevada's land and water to be protected by the year 2030. With me today is Christy Cabrera the Policy and Advocacy Director from Nevada's Conservation League. With the chair's permission, I would first like to provide some general background and a short summary of the resolution before I hand it over to my co-presenter. The conservation community, along with scientists, have long called for the ambitious conservation goals to address both climate change and the extinction of endangered species. Specifically, they've called for a long-term goal of conserving and sustaining, managing half of the planet by 2050. To achieve this long-term goal, they have set a target of conserving 30% of land and coastal seas by 2030. This has been called or referred to by the 30 by 30 target. The current White House administration issued an executive order in January to address the climate crisis by ordering a pause on new oil and gas leases on public lands and has committed to the 30 by 30 target. The majority of Americans in the Western U.S. support the national target of 30 by 30. Specifically, recent polls found almost 3/4 of voters are in support of this target. Furthermore, Nevada's abundant public lands lends itself to the follow of scientific community's recommendations. Currently, we only have around 15% of our lands protected in our state. More needs to be done to protect our precious lands and waters, and AJR is a step in this direction. With that, I would also like to briefly summarize this resolution. Assembly Joint Resolution 3 expresses support for the goal of protecting 30% of the lands and water in Nevada, as well as in the U.S. by 2030. The resolution urges Congress and the Biden administration to support a long-term goal of protecting half of the planet by 2050. The resolution further urges state and local agencies to work cooperatively with federal agencies to protect 30% of the lands and water in Nevada by 2030. The same agencies are urged to consult with tribal governments and provide fair treatment and meaningful involvement to people of all races, cultures, incomes, and natural origins by working with communities of color, indigenous communities, and economically disadvantaged communities. The resolution urges state and local agencies to encourage private landowners to participate in voluntary programs to protect wildlife habitats and increase carbon sequestration. And lastly, AJR urges federal, state, and local agencies to work with the Nevada congressional delegation to identify opportunities for federal legislation and regulatory action to expand protection and conservation measures on public lands in Nevada. And with the chair's permission, I would now like it to turn it over to my co-presenter on more details on the resolution.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Gonzalez, and welcome, Ms. Cabrera. Please proceed whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chair Watts and members of the committee. My name is Christy Cabrera, that's Christi, Cabrera, and I am the Policy and Advocacy Director for the Nevada Conservation League. I'd like to take some time to touch on why the 30 by 30 initiative is important across the country as well as in our great state. We're facing a massive environmental crisis. Every 30 seconds, a football field worth of America's natural areas disappears. At least 1/3 of American wildlife are at increased risk of extinction. And climate change is already having disastrous impacts across the globe. Nevada is on the front line of these crises. Our state has lost more than 9 million acres of wildlife habitat to wildfires in the last 2 decades, and we rank 3rd in the nation for having the highest number of species at risk. Nevada is also home to 2 of the fastest warming cities in the United States. To fend off these crises, many prominent scientists have called for the conservation of 30% of the world's lands and waters by the year 2030. And because Nevada is more than 80% federal land, we have a unique opportunity to lead the nation on the 30 by 30 effort. Conserving our state's lands and waters will help mitigate the effects of climate change and protect our wildlife, their habitat, and our precious natural resources. And in addition to all of that, conserving lands is good for our economy. A recent report out of the University of Cambridge found that the economic benefits of the 30 by 30 goal outweigh the costs by a ratio of at least 5 to 1. The report also shows that protection in today's economy brings in more revenue than the alternatives and likely adds revenue to agriculture and forestry, while helping prevent climate change, water crises, biodiversity loss, and disease. The 30 by 30 goal will also help Nevada's booming outdoor recreation economy that already contributes significantly to our state's revenue, boosts local businesses, and creates jobs. This is especially important as we continue to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. The 30 by 30 goal has widespread support across the country as well as in our state. In January, 450 bipartisan officials from 43 states signed an open letter supporting a national 30 by 30 goal. And last week, 70 mayors from across the state published a similar letter. Looking at Nevada, 2 county commissioners, 2 mayors, and 11 legislators signed on to these letters. This is also supported by various businesses, organizations, sportsmen, and tribal members in our state. I'd like to point to a letter that we submitted as an exhibit that has 18 organizations and businesses signed on in support of this resolution. The 30 by 30 goal is also widely popular among Nevada voters. A 2021 Conservation in the West poll found that 82% of Nevadans support this goal, and 85% support creating new national parks, national monuments, national wildlife recreation areas, and tribal protected areas. The passage of AJR 3 sends a message to Congress and federal land managers that Nevadans highly value our public lands and the communities, plants, and wildlife that depend on these resources. It also sends the message that Nevadans want to be active participants in conservation actions around our lands and waters, and that those conversations and actions need to have a robust and inclusive stakeholder process. In closing, conserving 30% of Nevada's lands and waters by 2030 will help our state mitigate against climate change, protect our treasured outdoor spaces, and give a much needed boost to our economy. The Nevada Conservation League and our partners encourage your support on this resolution. I'm happy to answer any questions the committee may have. And with that, I'll throw things back to Assemblywoman Gonzalez.
Thank you very much. Assemblywoman Gonzalez, do you have anything else to add, or are we ready to take it to questions?
Yes, we're ready for questions.
All right, thank you very much for your presentation. With that, we'll open it up to questions from members of the committee. I do not see anything in chat. Okay, we've got some hands going up. We'll start with Assemblywoman Hanson.
Hi, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to ask some questions. Actually, I just kind of want to, I'm going to take a little bit of issue with some of the claims made by Ms. Cabrera. I know we all, believe it or not, we worry about our environment and our climate and our beautiful state. But a little bit of some of the things you said in your opening statement sound reminiscent of some of the concerns that were parroted in the 70s by Paul Ehrlich, who was a big kind of biodiversity biologist. And there was a speech that he had given in the 70s that in the 70s, I mean, by the year 2000, that England might not even exist, and that there would be, dead fish along our coastlines if we continued on the course that we were on. Now, of course, Ehrlich's predictions have not come true. And so sometimes when I hear these really overreaching doomsday scenarios, I get a little concerned about, how factual they are. But that leads me to my real question is, how are we defining protect? Because if we're talking 30% in Nevada by 2030, 9 years away, 30% in Nevada is about my assembly district, which is one of the largest assembly districts in the state. So what does protect actually mean?
Thank you, Assemblywoman, through Chair Watts to Assemblywoman Hanson. I think that's open for discussion, and I think this resolution is really the start of that conversation. It needs to be a robust stakeholder process with everyone who cares about our public lands, whether that be private landowners, ranchers, conservationists, sportsmen, tribal representation. It needs to be a conversation that everyone's involved in to really discuss what that means for Nevada specifically. And because so much of our land is federally owned, it needs to be a conversation with our federal land managers and our congressional delegation as well.
So we don't have any definitive definitions per se of what protect means. So if we protect 30% of Nevada by 2030, is that 30%? Are we allowed to drive our four-wheeler on it? Are we allowed to camp on it? Are we allowed to graze our cattle on it? Are we able to have answers to any of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there are a lot of different kinds of, Christy Cabrera for the record, through Chair Watts to Assemblywoman Hanson. As I was saying, I think there are a lot of different kind of designations that have different levels of protection. So I know if a new wilderness area is designated, frequently grazing rights are grandfathered in and they are allowed to continue grazing there. There are more severe levels of protection where there aren't vehicles allowed, but there are levels of protection where there are. And I think outdoor recreation is so big in our state that we want to make sure that we're leaving it open to people who want to go out and enjoy our lands, whether that be hiking and camping, off-roading, hunting, all of that.
So protection could include maybe some of the more strict requirements of wilderness areas. When we say protect then in this resolution, it could be really strict conditions like we see in some wilderness areas.
Christy Cabrera for the record, through Chair Watts to Assemblywoman Hanson. It could be that, but it could also be other levels of protection. I think when we're looking at our state now and considering what's protected, we take into consideration national monuments, national parks, wilderness areas, all of those. So I think those would continue to be considered protection. I don't think it would be limited to one specific designation of protection. It wouldn't be only wildlife is considered protected or only national parks are considered protected. It would be more broad than that. So it would really depend on where we're talking about and what that designation is.
Okay, thank you. I will reserve maybe an opportunity to ask some questions after some others have turns, if that's okay, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to Assemblywoman Cohen.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I have a question about on page 3, the paragraph beginning on line 27, having to do with honoring tribal jurisdictions. So what I'm wondering is I thought tribal jurisdictions were already required to be honored under federal law. And I certainly understand that we want to have our indigenous tribes consulted and involved in decisions like this. but I think of that as being outside of their jurisdiction because their jurisdiction's already, again, set in federal law. Am I misunderstanding that?
Christy Cabrera, for the record, through Chair Watts to Vice Chair Cohen. I don't have an answer for that. I can look into it and follow up, though.
Okay, or Chair, maybe when our legal isn't so busy drafting, I can follow up with him.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. With that, we'll move on to our next question. I believe I have Assemblyman Wheeler, and Ms. Cabrera, just so you know, you can go directly to the member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had about 8 questions, and I think Assemblywoman Hanson asked most of them. So, but the only other thing that I can see here is I realize it's just a resolution, and we're asking basically Congress to do something here in the federal government. But what I'm wondering is, as you said, we're not asking for a certain level here, whether it be, gee, just designate these and everybody can go camping, or whether it be a full wilderness area where everything is removed. But what wasn't said is, would it be capable for the federal government to remove some of the water rights that's on some of this land, not make those water rights available to the public in the driest state in the nation?
Christy Cabrera, for the record, I haven't heard of that happening, but I can do more research and get back to you. But I would assume no.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to know for sure, obviously. I'm sure everyone would, because sometimes we can transfer those water rights from one place to another and be able to use it for certain things. Okay, well, we can get into the mismanagement the government's doing on our lands now later, I guess. But thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Wheeler. And I'll also just remind all the members of the committee that the waters within this state are held in public trust and managed by the state engineer. So any water right that is held within the state is managed in that way. And so I don't believe that anything action being proposed within this resolution would have any impact on our state water law and state water rights.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe federal law does trump our law, though. I'll have to look into that. Thank you.
Sure, we'll have legal follow-up on that. But again, I believe our water and our wildlife remain within the state's purview to manage in public trust for everyone. I believe we had a question from Assemblywoman Tice.
Did you call me, Mr. Chair? Wasn't you cut out?
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question circling back to your comments, Ms. Cabrera, regarding the importance of doing this particular letter. And one of the things you said, you mentioned wildland fires and due to the climate change that we've had wildland fires. And I'm just curious if you have some data on that, and if so, would you share? We had an interim committee on wildland fires, and really climate change wasn't really the major factor, other than obviously we have circles of droughts and we have that some of those concerns. However, the actual issue of climate change wasn't one of those resounding measures why we have those wildland fires. Perhaps poor management, perhaps response time, perhaps lightning, human causes. But I'm curious about how this bill or this letter supporting the 2030 or 30 by 30 would actually have any impact on wildland fires, since our 80% of our property in Nevada is already controlled by the federal government. And I'm just curious where the connection was that you feel it would decrease wildland fires.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Christy Cabrera, for the record. As far as climate change and fire relations go, climate change frequently makes the West hotter and drier, which leads to more more intense and faster fires. So we're seeing these really huge fires that we haven't seen in the past. Where I was really going with that, I think it was 9 million acres in the last 2 decades, is really just showing how much of our lands has been damaged by fire, especially wildlife habitat. So really just calling that out and showing that we need to be helping protect our habitat. And I mean, we can't flip a switch and all of a sudden have all of the fires go away. But having more protection against it, I think is helpful.
Well, I just needed some clarity there, because we already have, like I said, 80% of our land is already part of the federal government. Although we own the land, they manage it. And by now saying, well, we want 30% of the land protected, when hasn't helped having 80% protected. So I just wanted to make sure folks did not misunderstand what you were trying to say, that this would absolutely decrease wildfires. Because I don't think you can make that connection. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for the question. Do we have other questions from members for the presenters of this bill?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We'll go ahead to Assemblyman Ellison, and then we'll go to Assemblywoman Anderson after that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that. One of the questions I have, I mean, we're going to ask for Congress to consider this, but don't you think we should come up with a plan? Because I don't think anybody realizes how much 30% of the waters in the state of Nevada is. The only place that's got that much water that you could actually look at, it'd be the Hoover Dam or something like this. I know we're coming up with new, better and better ideas all the time, like, salt and trying to make a deal with Mexico and stuff. But don't you think we should have a plan of where they're talking about and where the waters that come from in the state before we'd ever put a resolution in? And maybe I'm wrong, but it seemed like to me we're putting the cart before the horse. Could you answer that?
Thank you, Assemblyman Christy Cabrera, for the record. That's really the point of this resolution, Assemblyman, is to start that conversation, bring stakeholders together, and come up with a plan of what can be protected in our state, where those areas are, what kinds of designations should we be considering protection or considering for these various areas. So I really see this bill as a call to action for all stakeholders, as well as our federal land managers and our federal delegation, to come together and work on a plan and figure that out.
Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Mr. Ellison. With that, we'll go on to Assemblywoman Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for the presentation and bringing this forward. I just wanted to bring up on page 2, basically lines 32 to 41, where there's the recognition of the Division of Outdoor Recreation. There's the recognition of our the industry itself, and just wondering if there had been some discussion with the groups that had sent us a letter where it basically said, we got to recognize the positive roles that hunting and fishing play in conservation, et cetera. If there had been discussion with the group that had sent that letter that is in there were many groups mentioned that is in the exhibits. If you need me to, I can read the different groups if that will help expand upon the question. Anybody that would like to answer that, I'm more than happy to allow that, or whoever would like to answer it. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Christy Cabrera, for the record. Yes, absolutely. We have been in many conversations with all of those groups. I don't think that letter was intended as an opposition letter, but rather as calling out the importance of sportsmen in this conversation. And I could not agree more. Sportsmen have done so much for conservation in our state and continue to do so, and absolutely should have a seat at the table. So we are in very frequent conversations with them. If this resolution does move forward, I fully expect them to be part of that larger stakeholder process of figuring out what lands we can conserve and protect and what kind of designations we should have. But yes, absolutely, constant communication with the sportsmen.
Thank you, Ms. Cabrera, for connecting the dots for me. I greatly appreciate it. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Anderson. I have a couple of brief questions that I'd like to ask. One, I believe parts of this resolution mention cooperation with private landowners as well. And I was just wondering if you could speak to conservation easements and other private agreements, as would that be something that would be contemplated under the language of this resolution as a way to protect lands while engaging our private landowners as well?
Thank you, Chair Watts. Christy Cabrera for the record. Yes, absolutely. I believe that is in the resolved section of the resolution calling for state and local agencies to encourage private landowners to participate in voluntary programs. I fully understand that conservation easements have been thrown out there as being considered protection under the 30 by 30 initiative across the nation. So I would assume that would play in Nevada as well. Although, of course, we would like to have longer conversations with private landowners to see if that's something they would be interested in, if that makes sense for them as being considered protected. Like I said, we really want to have a robust and lengthy discussion about what this means for our state.
Thank you very much for that clarification. I appreciate that. And it sounds like there's a variety of options for how this goal could be met, all of which come with different potential uses for the land that can continue, whether they're designated as national parks, national monuments, wilderness areas, state parks, conservation easements, etc. One question I had, and I admit that I've looked into this issue a bit before, and I've also seen the word restore often used as well as protect. And I was reminded of this in the discussion about wildfire as well and the impact that that's had on some of our lands. So could you just speak to the role that habitat restoration could play in meeting the goal of this resolution?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm sorry that I didn't include those in my remarks earlier. I wasn't thinking about it. But restoration is absolutely critical, and I think could be considered as protected or conserved as our 30 by 30 goal. So I think that could play a huge part in it. And I know there are lots of groups in the state as well as across the country that are advocating for that to be included.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And that could help restore some of our lands to some of the uses that have been lost, as well as providing critical habitat for our wildlife. One last question I had, and I don't know if you have any figures on this. Again, I think the definitions that we use for some of the protections may make this a bit of a moving target, but as has been stated, we have quite a bit of land here under federal management. And my understanding is that we still have quite a bit of land that is at least undeveloped, knowing that we have seen some large impacts from wildfires. But I believe that we have a large amount of land that is eligible for this protection, but just doesn't have that formal protection status. And I was just wondering, is there, it seems to me that under consideration of this, Nevada could even punch above its weight in terms of conserving additional lands. We know that some other states and other parts of the country are going to have difficulty meeting their own benchmarks, and that could potentially come with some form of agreement to provide investments to support our state and our rural communities. Is that something that could potentially be part of a national 30 by 30 framework?
Thank you, Chair Watts. Christy Cabrera for the record. Yes, that has been frequently discussed. We know especially some of the smaller states on the east side of the country don't have as much available land. So I fully expect that Secretary of the Interior nominee Holland will be looking at this on a nationwide view, and I'm assuming looking at some of our western states to protect more than 30% in order to reach that 30% goal across the country.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and interested in seeing how those conversations may continue and bring in additional resources to enhance and protect and restore the lands within our state, and how that could benefit all of our communities. So do members have any additional questions for the presenters of this bill? All right. Seeing none, thank you for your presentation. We will now move on to testimony. I will again briefly say that in order to provide testimony, you must sign up on the legislative website. We will be limiting all testimony to 2 minutes so that we can get through our agenda in a timely manner. In addition, for this bill, we will be limiting testimony to 30 minutes each for support, opposition, and neutral testimony. So with that, I'd like to ask Broadcast Production Services to go to the phone queue and see if we have anyone wishing to testify in support of Assembly Joint Resolution 3.
Thank you, Chair. To testify in support on AJR 3, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits 377. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Chair Watts and members of the committee, my name is Jana Moan, Jainamoan, and I'm the External Affairs Director for the Nature Conservancy in Nevada. We are a global organization conducting science-based, on-the-ground conservation work to support our mission of conserving the lands and waters on which all life depends. We are here to testify in support of AJR 3. We want to thank Assemblywoman Gonzalez and the sponsors and co-sponsors for bringing this resolution forward. The Nature Conservancy strongly supports the goal to conserve 30% of lands, waters, and oceans by 2030. We provided a written testimony and a fact sheet that offers guidance on how to achieve this goal. Notably, we believe that a broad definition of protection is warranted to include conservation efforts on public, private, and tribal land. All ecosystem types should have a minimum level of protection supported with effective management, and protection should be durable and equitable. Our written testimony also provided a conceptual map of resilient connected lands and waters in Nevada. These are places that have the potential to offer refuge for species as they move in latitude and elevation to adapt to the effects of climate change. This map is a qualitative analysis. More science needs to be done to understand the suitability and durability of specific locations, but we wanted to share it with the committee to provide a visual example of the areas in Nevada that warrant further investigation as being suitable places for protection to meet a 30 by 30 goal. A lot of work needs to be done to achieve this goal. This resolution represents the first step, which is a statement of support for 30 by 30. The Nature Conservancy is committed to this goal, and we are available to help achieve it by providing our own science, mapping, and support. We urge the members of this committee to vote yes for AJR 3. Thank you so much for hearing my testimony.
Thank you for sharing your testimony, Ms. Moan. We'll go on to the next caller in support.
Caller with the last 3 digits 768. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Yes, Chairman Watts and members of the Assembly Natural Resource Committee, my name is Larry Johnson. I'm president of the Coalition for Nevada's Wildlife. We have submitted written comments jointly with other sportsman groups in a correspondence dated March 9th. I just want to summarize a couple of things. We are in support of the concept of the 30-30 policy. We do have certain contingencies to our support, and those include recognizing existing and varying land management levels, actions that currently afford protection, working to identify additional conservation needs and actions through an objective, science-driven, stakeholder-engaged process to determine the appropriate level of management actions necessary to meet conservation goals, developing protected area definitions that allow for well-managed and sustainable wildlife-dependent activities that are in harmony with other management goals, and clearly defining roles and authorities for the entities charged with carrying out the 30-30 proposal. There are certain levels of protection such as wilderness designations that may not be entirely in line with wildlife management goals in semi-arid climate, such as Nevada. But there are definitely needs to protect things like wildlife migration corridors, deer wintering areas, precious water resources. We need the ability to do habitat improvements, et cetera, et cetera. In general, we are in support of the concept, but sportsmen definitely need to be at the table as this process continues. We thank you and call for your support of this. I think good things could happen if carefully tailored to the needs of Nevada. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Thompson. We'll go on to the next caller and support.
Caller with the last three digits 222. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you, Chairman Watts and committee members. My name is Russell Coleman, Russell. Last name is Kuhlman. I'm here today to represent the Nevada Wildlife Federation and would like to express our support for this resolution. Nevadans cherish our public lands and landscapes. It is one of the largest economic drivers in many rural communities, providing approximately 59,000 jobs and $1.1 billion in state and local tax revenue every year. This resolution expresses the broad collaboration between all public user land groups, including the sporting community, which historically has a very successful track record for large-scale conservation objectives, including the North American Model for Wildlife Conservation, the duck stamp that contributes millions of dollars every year for wetland habitat improvements, and the Federal Aid Waterfowl Restoration Act, commonly known as the Pittman-Robertson Act, just to name a few. I believe the 30 by 30 resolution has the potential to become another historic conservation victory, and the Nevada Wildlife Federation is excited to be a supporter of this resolution and looks forward to further collaboration with various public land advocates to help protect areas of importance for ourselves and the future generations yet to come. And we please ask you to support this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Kuhlman. We'll go on to the next person wishing to provide testimony in support.
Caller with the last three digits 268. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
My name is Nikolai Christensen, Nikolai Christenson, and I'm here to speak in favor of AJR 3. The Biden administration has committed the United States to protecting at least 30% of the country's area by 2030. This overlaps considerably with what is proposed in AJR 3. Nevada should do its part and make at least the same commitment to protect this amount of space within our state. We have the undeveloped area. We have plenty of amazing natural spaces that warrant additional protection. This is not only good climate policy, it's good for Nevada's rapidly growing outdoor recreation industry. We already see overcapacity crowds at places such as Red Rock Canyon. We need additional accessible, protected wild spaces to help avoid our existing spaces being loved to death. 2 years ago, the Nevada Legislature passed a bill to identify policies that will help abate climate change. There are a lot of steps Nevada could and should take to ensure a livable future in our state. AJR 3 would definitely be one of these steps, and frankly, it's one of the easiest that we could make. Appropriately, AJR 3 does not stop with its commitment to 30 by 30. It recommends establishing a Vickwamine National Monument. It advocates permanent protection for the Desert National Wildlife Refuge. These would be positive developments for our state and, frankly, for our entire nation. As part of a broad commitment to our future, I urge you to adopt AJR 3. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. We'll go on to the next caller in support.
Caller with the last three digits 167. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Grace Palermo for the record, GracePalermo. I'm the Southern Nevada Programs Director for Friends of Nevada Wilderness, and I want to echo other supporters for this resolution. From providing more outdoor recreation opportunities near urban areas, to enhancing the outdoor experience in our rural landscapes, to preserving some of the wildest open expanses of land in Nevada, the 30 by 30 initiative will support the health and well-being of all Nevadans and slow the threats of habitat loss, air and water pollution, and climate change. We know that Nevadans feel strongly about the importance of protecting much of our public lands from destructive development and keeping wildlife habitat and important wildlife corridors intact. We urge the members of this committee to support AJR3 and continue to advocate for policies that will help achieve the goals of the 30 by 30 initiative. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Palermo. We'll go on to the next caller in support.
Caller with the last three digits 104, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good evening, members of the committee. My name is Maria Teresa Lieberman Parraga. That is MARIA-TERESA-LIEBERMANN-PARRAGA. And I am here with Battleborn Progress. We are in full support of AJR3, especially since, as many have mentioned, Nevada is on the front lines of the issues that this resolution addresses. Our state is home to some of the most unique, valuable wildlife species, ranking as 6th in the nation for the number of unique species, 9th in mammal diversity, and 11th in the nation in total species diversity. However, we are 3rd in the nation for having the highest number of species at risk. So to confront the rapid loss of Nevada's precious wildlife, we must work to accelerate land and water conservation and restoration here in our state. And our commitment to 30 by 30 would ensure that we are protecting this wild heritage in the Silver State. And we hope you will support this resolution, and thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. We'll move on to the next caller in support.
Caller with the last three digits 792. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
This is Patrick Donnelly, PatrickDonnelly. I'm Nevada State Director with the Center for Biological Diversity. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to Assemblywoman Gonzalez for sponsoring this resolution. We support AJR3. 30 by 30 is an important framework for preserving land for the future, to protect biodiversity, and preserve vital carbon sinks on undisturbed lands. We would note that, as the resolution makes note of, this is an incremental step toward the overall goal of 50% preservation by 2050, the so-called half-Earth goal. 30 by 30 remains our best tool for understanding the magnitude of land preservation that we need to pursue. And this resolution is an important step in signaling to our federal delegation and the world that the people of the state of Nevada support large-scale protection of lands. We urge you to support AJR3. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Donnelly. We'll go on to the next caller in support.
Caller with the last three digits 820. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last three digits 820. Please press *6 to unmute and you may begin.
Chair Watts and members of the committee, my name is Laura Richards, LauraRichards. I'm a volunteer member of the club's legislative committee and a retired wildlife biologist with the state of Nevada. On behalf of the Sierra Club and our more than 30,000 members and supporters statewide, I am speaking in support of AJR3. Public lands, waters, and forests are spaces that protect the health of people, wildlife, and the planet. These places are under threat and are disappearing.
With the threat of climate change and 1 million species at risk of extinction around the world, we need bold actions such as AJR3 to combat this. In Nevada, we have seen more intense wildfires, dangerous droughts, and loss of habitat due to sprawl and development, all of which is resulting in degradation of rangelands, forests, and unsafe air quality that takes a toll on human health, the economy, and the environment. We have a moral duty to stop the climate crisis for future generations. Conserving more nature will make our communities healthier and safer, both now and in the future. This resolution is an important call for action, urging the U.S. Congress, Governor Sisolak, and federal, state, and local agencies to work cooperatively to protect 30% of Nevada's lands and waters by 2030. This resolution is Nevada's first step in doing our part in creating a vision to protect nature and combat the climate crisis. To reach this ambitious goal, we encourage Nevada lawmakers to urge the federal government to use all conservation measures available, including new national monuments, wildlife refuges, and wilderness study areas. We also urge prioritizing conservation efforts of tribal nations, towns, and cities, and landowners. For the reasons above, we urge you to support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. We'll go on to the next person wishing to offer testimony and support.
Caller with the last three digits 139, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hello, my name is David Ricker, DAVID-RICKER, and I represent the Nevada chapter of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. But first, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee for addressing this joint resolution. I would like to reiterate that the letter mentioned previously by Assemblywoman Anderson, of which the group I represent is a signee, was not meant to be an opposition letter, as Ms. Cabrera already stated. We broadly support this resolution as written. With that said, we are concerned about the specifics of this initiative and need concrete details to ensure our enduring support. We must have some flexibility in how protected land is defined so that habitat improvement projects and fire restoration and mitigation can be conducted as effectively and efficiently as possible. We are concerned about how this will affect feral horse and burrow management. And lastly, we're concerned that the public land-rich states of the West will shoulder too heavy a burden as compared to the privately held Great Plains and Eastern states and be asked to conserve more than our share without just recompense. I would like to thank members of this committee for their shrewd commentary and questions, which have already highlighted many of our concerns, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your testimony. We'll go on to the next caller wishing to offer support.
If you have just joined us recently, we are on support for AJR3. Please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, it seems that there are no more callers in support at this time.
Thank you very much. With that, we'll move on to testimony in opposition of Assembly Joint Resolution 3.
If you would like to testify in opposition of AJR3, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits 105. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Chairman and committee, my name is Lynn Chapman. I'm the state treasurer of the Independent American Party. We are opposed to AJR3. I heard a speaker this morning discussing the federal takeover of our state's sovereignties throughout the United States. And my mind went right to AJR3 and how this resolution sounds very much what he was describing. Private property is an important reason why people left their birth countries to come to the New World, and they are still trying to get here today. Private property is an important part of our country, and it goes hand in hand with our liberties. George Washington wrote that, quote, "Freedom and property rights are inseparable. You can't have one without the other," unquote. To use pretty words like protecting the land and water is a bit deceiving to Nevada citizens. This resolution is not exactly being truthful. Please vote no on AJR 3. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. We'll go on to the next person wishing to testify in opposition.
Caller with the last three digits, 010. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you. I'm Jake Tibbetts. That's JakeTibbitts. And I'm the Eureka County Natural Resources Manager representing Eureka County. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thanks for the opportunity to give our insights on AJR 3. We've submitted written testimony for the record and just summarizing our testimony here. So while we're opposed to AJR 3 as is, we're not opposed to truly working together to address the issues the language is intended to address. Our concern is with the 30 by 30 initiative itself. From what we've seen, it's a top-down decree that has a bias towards set-aside, hands-off areas and restrictive land use regulations. This alienates many rural Nevadans and Americans who otherwise support healthy lands, waters, and wildlife. The 30 by 30 initiative will undoubtedly end up reducing working lands, implementing hands-off management, increasing wildfires, reducing productivity, and impairing rural communities. Land users and managers operate at reduced capability in areas with mostly hands-off protection designations. They cannot implement sound land and resource management actions in these areas. I will note also, Mr. Chairman, that there are implications on state water law with some of these things. If any of these protected areas become federal reservations, they could have implications on public water reserves, where there's always a public water reserve to fit the need and purpose of a federal land designation. So there could be implications on the state's water resources. The work should instead be focused on working with local and tribal governments and the private sectors with a local-driven focus built on proven models of incentive-based and locally led conservation and keeping working lands working. Crucial to this vision is keeping private ag lands profitable. Much of the prime and invaluable wildlife and riparian habitat in the state is under private control. Many of these private ag lands are tied to ranching operations conducted on or in concert with federal lands. Anytime there's restrictions on federal lands, there's a cascade effect on the private lands, and there's a risk of degradation or subdivision of private lands. We wish to be clear that we
could begin to wrap up your remarks, please.
Okay, I will, Mr. Chair, sorry. We want to be clear that we do want to address the issues identified in this initiative. The way to do this is to work incentive-based conservation, not disenfranchise and offend rural communities and those making a living off the natural resource uses. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Mr. Tibbetts. We'll go on to the next caller in opposition.
Caller with the last three digits, 859. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon. This is Janine Hansen, JANINEHANSEN. I'm the state president of Nevada Families for Freedom. We have serious concerns about AJR 3 and consider it a threat to one of the most essential freedoms, the unalienable right of private property. John Adams said the moment the idea is admitted into society that property is not as sacred as the law of God and that there is not a force of law and public justice to protect it, anarchy and tyranny commence. Private property owners are mentioned in the resolution only as an afterthought, encouraging them to participate in voluntary programs. There is no recognition of the critical importance of private property to our state's economy or the wonderful job most private landowners do to preserve our state's wildlife and resources. The sponsors of this bill are uninformed about the realities of the land and water in Nevada. The federal government controls 87% of Nevada's lands, and they have mismanaged it dreadfully, resulting in destructive wildfires and the loss of agricultural enterprises in ranching and farming, and harmed innumerable wildlife by destroying natural habitat. What this resolution does not acknowledge is that there are many current inheritable property rights on that 87% of the land controlled by the feds. These include grazing rights and mineral rights. In addition, almost all the water in Nevada already has legal water rights attached, and there is no water for this outlandish resolution to lock up. The goals of this resolution are possible only if the government plans to steal or confiscate the property and water rights of those who legally own it in Nevada. This resolution is outside the realm of reality unless the real plan is to use the force of government to take private property rights and legally protected water rights from the Nevada citizens. Please reject AJR 3 and protect our most essential freedom of private property. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go on to the next caller in opposition.
Caller with the last three digits 674. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Yes, my name is Wade Polson, General Manager of Lincoln County Water District. My WADEPOULSEN. Lincoln County Water District is opposed to AJR 3. Lincoln County is home to the Nevada Test Range, Area 51, 7 wilderness areas, 2 critical BLM conservation areas, 5 state parks, 2 national wildlife reserves, and 1 national monument, which has inhibited the ability for Lincoln County to create a tax base. Several million acres have been taken out of potential tax base for Lincoln County, thus making Lincoln County a welfare county. These designations have happened over the last 20 to 30 and 40 years. We appreciate the tourism. We appreciate the hunting and the hunters that come up to Lincoln County, although that is not an economic development for Lincoln County. Creating tax base is the only way that Lincoln County will be able to get out of their welfare status. Thank you for your time, and we oppose AJR 3, and we would like to encourage the committee to oppose AJR 3. Thank you.
Thank you for your remarks, Mr. Polson. We'll go on to the next caller in opposition.
Caller with the last three digits 349. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
For the record, my name is Doug Busselman. I'm the Doug, D-O-U-G, Busselman, B-U-S-S-E-L-M-A-N. I'm the Executive Vice President of Nevada Farm Bureau. We are testifying today in opposition to AJR 3. Our concern over AJR 3 center on the meaning of the wording, quote, protecting 50% of the world's lands, oceans, and waters by 2050, unquote, as well as the wording, quote, protecting 30% of the lands and waters in this state by 2030, unquote. We appreciate the questions asked regarding what does protecting mean. We still are unclear over the calculations of the 50% or the 30% and how these levels are derived. These terms and how they translate into actions impacts economic consequences as well as people's property. As conservation-minded people, farmers and ranchers have a different view of how using natural resources isn't a bad thing, and locking the ability for use of our federally managed lands under designations of wilderness, parks, national monument areas, etc., doesn't automatically qualify those designated lands as being protected in our view. In our view, protection should mean active management as opposed to designation for non-management. Nevada farmers and ranchers already provide a great deal of enhanced wildlife habitat and essential resources through the production activities they carry out while making a living. Resolutions like AJR 3 in and of themselves serve as worthy aspirational concepts. How those aspirational concepts translate into impacts on people who depend on their private property and the ability to use natural resources for their livelihoods also matter. These potential ramifications are the reason for our opposing AJR 3. Thank you for this opportunity to share our perspective.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Busselman. We'll move on to the next person wishing to provide testimony in opposition.
Chair, there are no more callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you very much. With that, we'll move on to testimony in the neutral position on AJR 3.
If you would like to testify in the neutral position on AJR 3, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits 857, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Watts and members of the committee. My name is Chauncey Chow Duong. Chauncey spelled C-H-A-U-N-S-E-Y. Chow Duong spelled C-H-A-U-D-U-O-N-G. Here on behalf of the Southern Nevada Water Authority, which provides water to over 2.2 million residents in Southern Nevada. The Southern Nevada Water Authority is neutral on this bill, but we did want to inform the committee that we worked with Assemblywoman Gonzalez on possibly amending AJR 3 to further emphasize the importance of water conservation in the state by urging state and local agencies that utilize the Colorado River to adopt requirements to remove existing non-functional turf by December 31st, 2026. The watering of non-functional turf is an inefficient use of water, and by removing non-functional turf, water can be prioritized and used for more efficient and effective purposes. Although we are not proposing an amendment to AJR 3, we would like to thank Assemblywoman Gonzalez for her time and will be seeking a legislative vehicle this session to further advance water conservation by requiring the removal of non-functional turf. I appreciate the ability to provide comments and thank the committee for its time.
Thank you for your comments. We'll go on to anyone else wishing to testify in a neutral position on AJR 3.
Caller with the last 3 digits 280, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Colby Prout, C-O-L-B-Y-P-R-O-U-T. I'm the Natural Resources Manager for the Nevada Association of Counties. NACO's members are all 17 of Nevada's counties. AJR 3 outlines the legislature's support of an admirable goal set out by the Biden administration to conserve 30% of the nation's land by 2030. Nevada's counties also believe strongly in conservation and always have. 86% of Nevada's land is managed by the federal government, and the majesty of our natural resources are an essential part of the quality of life in our communities. Much of our work at NACO is focused on making sure that the federal government listens to local concerns and coordinates land use and management decisions with counties. It is counties who are often trying to get a seat at the table on large federal projects that impact natural resources and public lands, not the other way around. Specifically, NACO hopes that by encouraging the federal government to move forward with its 30 by 30 initiative, this legislature also recognizes that whatever future designations or restrictions of public land use occur, that they be consistent with the local land use plans, not incapacitate mandated county functions and infrastructure, and be implemented only after consultation and coordination with local governments. Basically, it's important that counties are at the table for any of these conversations. We do want to thank the sponsor, Assemblywoman Gonzalez, and the representative of the Nevada Conservation League for taking the time to talk with us about AJR 3 and hear our perspective regarding the importance of the role of local governments. County, state, and federal interests are often aligned when it comes to conservation. For instance, the recent Clark County Lands Bill introduced by Senator Cortez Masto was the result of extensive local consultation and conversations that demonstrate just how important these conversations in local communities and with local governments can be. The Clark County Lands Bill looks to preserve some of the same areas identified in AJR 3, such as the Desert National Wildlife Refuge and the Ave Kwa'ami National Monument, while also respecting county needs. Thank you for your time, committee, and please do not hesitate to reach out to NACO with any questions.
Thank you for providing your comments. We'll go on to the next caller wishing to testify in neutral.
For those that have joined recently, we are on testimony in neutral for AJR 3. Please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits 864, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Yes, this is Nina Laxalt, Neena, last name Laxalt, and I was in the queue for opposition and was not called, so I had to call in on the neutral position. And Mr. Chair, is that okay with you if I go ahead?
Yes, Ms. Laxalt, we still had time remaining for opposition testimony, so go ahead and proceed.
Thank you. I will make it quick. Today I'm representing the Nevada Cattlemen's Association in opposition to AJR 3. Many of the comments and concerns that the cattlemen have been brought up, most specifically by Eureka County and by the Nevada Farm Bureau. The Nevada Cattlemen's Association and the farmers in Nevada have been taking care of land and water in the state of Nevada for many generations, so there is no opposition, certainly, to taking care of the precious resources we have in the state. The concern is that some of the science that has been relied on has become extremely politicized and controversial, and at times the science is providing biased and slanted information rather than taking into consideration all points of view. Number one, we believe that language is vague in the joint resolution. Not all stakeholders have been brought in to have this discussion, and we believe it's very important that the historical background on the management of the state of Nevada and its resources don't go back 20 years, but go back a few hundred years to see how it's been managed by some of the ranching and the farming thus far. And with that, we appreciate your allowing us to present and would be happy to join the efforts to speak with those who have presented this bill. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Laxalt. We will have them classified as opposition, and we will return to see if anyone else wishes to testify in the neutral position on AJR 3.
Chair, there are no more callers in neutral at this time.
Thank you. With that, I'll turn it back over to Assemblywoman Gonzalez and her co-presenter to see if there are any closing remarks.
Christy, did you want to go first? I couldn't remember. I apologize. Okay, awesome. So in closing, I would like to thank you all for the opportunity to present AJR 3, and I urge your support for this important legislation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll also note that we did have many letters come in, most of which were referenced or who had people call in. I know Ms. Karen Boger also submitted a letter for the record. So just want to remind members to please check the exhibits on Nellis, and we may have some more coming in following the meeting as well. I just want to make sure everybody's testimony is seen or heard. So with that, thank you so much for your presentation of the bill. I will close the hearing on Assembly Joint Resolution 3. That moves us on to the final item on our agenda today, which is public comment. As with testimony, we're limiting public comment to 2 minutes each. And in order to provide public comment, you must sign up, and we will provide the information for you to call in. With that, I will turn it over to Broadcast Production Services one more time to see if we have anyone in the queue to provide public comment.
Thank you, Chair. If you would like to participate in public comment, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits 490, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last three digits 490, please press *6 to unmute, and you may begin.
Hello, my name is Cyrus Hojati.
Cyrus Hojjaty. I just have general comments about the environment. Do you guys realize that urban heat island is a different issue than climate change? I want to make sure that you guys know that Las Vegas is the fastest warming city, not mainly due to global climate change, but to urban climate change, that how the rural towns nearby have a larger gap between day and night temperatures. You talk about how we need climate justice. Why aren't Asian Americans suffering from climate change disproportionately? I'm just curious to know. And also, I want to understand that are these conservation elements going to impact home prices, because housing supply is also an issue. You guys talk about green living. What about these politicians? Are they living the green lifestyle, how they drive, how they live, how they get around across the world? And furthermore, my final thought, more importantly, is why do we consume so much resources? Why do we give out so many emissions? Why aren't people talking about the fact that it's Wall Street that's the elephant in the room when it comes to the environment, the lending system, the Federal Reserve? Think about the fact that if we didn't have all this credit, we wouldn't be able to buy all this gasoline, cars, housing. If you shut down credit all tomorrow, consumption of resources were to collapse overnight. The reason why you're seeing all this massive construction in the Las Vegas Valley of housing is due to this Wall Street Federal Reserve banking system. So what can you do? You might as well just cut it off. Why don't you guys advocate that? You see, and I think the problem is that we guys keep talking about, oh, we've got the environment and but I kind of feel like it's the average person is being hunted down, but the real culprit are these large corporations. And I feel like people in this legislature and governments all across the world don't talk about that, because I feel like Nevada is a state that it is a merger of casino, real estate, and
Thank you,
labor
Mr.
union
Hojjaty,
merging
for your
with the government.
comments. Your time is up. BPS, can we please move on to the next caller?
Caller with the last three digits 674. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Yes, this is Wade Polson from Lincoln County Water District again. Wade, W-A-D-E, Polson, P-O-U-L-S-E-N. I wanted to give an example of how taking, designating an area creates a problem for developing water resources. When the Basin and Range National Monument was created, Lincoln County Water District had water applications out in Garden Valley. We also, Lincoln County, had designated certain amount of acres, about 3,000 to 5,000 acres, that was supposed to be disposed from the 2000 Lincoln County Land Act. The BLM did not put it into the queue, did not dispose of it. So when the Basin and Range National Monument came in, our applications for water in Garden Valley became null and void. Thus, we're not able to develop those water resources for the economic development of Lincoln County. I just wanted to share how taking land out of a tax base and preserving it creates a situation with developing water resources in this state and in Lincoln County. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And just to be clear, Mr. Polson was sharing an anecdote and was not providing testimony on Assembly Joint Resolution 3. We'll move on to the next caller, wishing to provide public comment, again, which is not related to any of the bills that we have already heard during this meeting.
Chair, the public line is open and working, but there are no callers at this time.
Thank you very much, Broadcast and Production Services, for your assistance in ensuring that people can participate in the committee meeting. Thank you to all the members of the public who called in and participated in the bills that were heard today. And thank you to the members of this committee for their time and attention. That concludes our meeting for today. Our next meeting will be on Monday, March 15th at 4 p.m. And with that, this meeting is adjourned.